G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and today we're going to be looking at the Age of Darkness, the Horus Heresy Exemplary Battles of the Age of Darkness, Volume 1, which suggests there is going to be more than one volume of this, and I think I understand why. But rather than launching into the typical Outer Circle, bad, look at all the things that are wrong with this, I want to today start with the positive. And like the book, this will be quite short. So it's a positive, I think, that we actually have a book here where we're not just focused on what is going on with the Imperial Fists, for example. You know, we're not focusing on the Loyalists in the Siege of Terror, the defense of the Sol system, any of that. What we have here is a group of different battles that take place all across the galaxy. We have battles that are taking place in the aftermath of the novel Betrayer. In the Ultramar segmentum, we have battles that are taking place with the shattered remnants of the Salamanders. All of this is great, and I've been on record before stating that we need to have campaign books, one that focuses on Gorgar and Angron's rampage across Ultramar, and Gilman's efforts to stem the tide. A book that follows on from that, which is the arrival of the Blood Angels, the Dark Angels, and the Night Lords into the conflict zone. And we need to have a book that focuses on the Shattered Legions, which should cover things like Black Shields, the Shattered Legions, and probably also the White Scars, and to a lesser degree the Space Wolves, because those legions are the ones that are out there on the front line, continuing the battle against the traitors between Horus's betrayal and Terra, because there is no one else between Terra than those legions. So those are interesting campaigns that I would like to see, and this book touches on them in some degree. Of course, it's not focused on any one of these campaigns, which is an issue that we'll get into, and so, well, it does feel a little bit slapped together in that regard. Another interesting thing that the book has done here is that it's giving us in print the Exemplary Battles units, which many people did not believe were viable units, despite that being stated time and again by the company that yes, these can be used in any game of Horus Heresy. These are mainline units. Many people felt that because they weren't in a printed book, they do not count. Well, now they're in a printed book, so enjoy. And lastly, we get the sort of Fallen Emperor's Children, where they're being treated as pseudo-Chaos Space Marines, and the Demon Primarch Fulgrim, and accompanying rules for playing them, for rights of war, campaign missions, all that kind of thing. And, of course, the production quality is the typical Games Workshop level of production quality. That is to say, yes, it has some level of quality. And that's pretty much where the praise in this review kind of has to end. Now, there'll be a lot of people out there who say, well, you know, you're always negative, Outer Circle, Yep, sure, fine. There's also a lot of people out there who want to say, well, the community is never happy with anything they receive. This book was only ever stated to be a reprinting of the Exemplary Battles units. Yep, I agree. There was no false advertising or anything like that there that make us think we were getting something different to that. Totally down with it. No, my problems stem from the fact that we have a book here that, well, it's $84. It's $84, and we have 111-ish pages of units in the contents. Well, not units. We have about 10 pages of sort of semi-new content. We have one rules change to an existing legacy unit. We have one new legacy unit, and that's kind of it. But we're being charged $84 for this, and, well, to give you some context, the Siege of Chthoniya, that's 98 Australian dollars. The Loyalist Legiones Astartes Army book is 344 pages. So over 3 times the size, and price-wise, 30% more. So we have a bit of a price discrepancy problem here. That in and of itself is going to infuriate people. Because basically the impression one gets is it's a minimum effort output. And I mean, printing is not an expensive, nor is it a cheap endeavour. Printing in scale will reduce the price of something. If you need to print 10,000 copies of something versus 100, the 10,000 is going to be cheaper. There's a longer production run, setting up the tooling that's required, all of that. So I can understand how the Loyalist Legiones Astartes army book would be more content for the money you pay. And I can understand how this book would be less content for the money you pay. But if we're going to be printing these books, and we're going to be printing a limited quantity, I think it would be advisable to put more content into the base book. What am I getting at with this? Well, we have Iron Warriors versus something like Imperial Fists. Are the Huskarls and Imperial Fists Exemplary Battle Unit included in the book? No. Okay. What about the Salamanders? They have a new Exemplary unit. What about their existing Exemplary unit? The Adherents? No, they're not in the book either. So you can't even find all of the resources for any one of these legions in the one place. The Emperor's Children, they have the rules for the Corrupted Emperor's Children, the Hereticus Emperor's Children, and yet the rules for the Sun Killers, their Exemplary Battles unit, were not present in this book. To me, this is a fundamental failing of the book. If you're going to print a book like this, condense as much information into it as you can, and even if you are restricted to that number of pages. Say the editing team has said, nah, we can only put this many pages in, we've been told by higher management that they want the book to stick at, 111 pages. Fine. Cut away one of the other forces, perhaps. Say something like pick one of the odd ones out, like the Atramentar. Just cut the Night Lords section away from the book, increase the size of the Salamanders and the Emperor's Children accordingly. That would be how I would suggest approaching it, because what we end up with instead is an unsatisfying combination of both worlds. And it's very hard to get behind that with positive critique, with praise in any form, because it's blatantly anti-consumer. And of course, here at the Outer Circle, we're all about you, the customer, and, getting the best bang for your buck. And that's just wrong. Now, on top of this, the Exemplary Battles units that were included in the book, none of them were revisited, with the exception of the Lightning Claws on the Atramentar changed by 5 points. That's it, 5 points. The Atramentar themselves are an awful unit comparatively to what else is available in the game, because there are so many ways of making units that are equivalent to. And if somebody has an identical equivalent unit that's available just out of the stock rules, then there's really no reason for it to exist. And the Atramentar fall into this trap, because basically, unless you want a 20-man Terminator squad, there's no real need to have them as separate rules. They are weapon skill 4 Legion Terminators, in almost every sense. There are some slight tweaks, but if you take Night Lords, Traitor Terminators, Legion Terminators, Traitor Legion Terminators, and you put Sevatar in the Force, you functionally get Atramentar, So it's hard to say that there is such a gulf between the two that the Atramentar, as implemented, really justify their existence. Then we see the faux pas of things like war crimes being committed, where it's like, we know the Atramentar are supposed to have these lion-headed pauldrons on their right shoulder, and one of the people is actually, who's showcased their miniatures in the book, has shown this. They show the lion-headed pauldrons on their converted models, which have sort of contocarb torsos with cataphracti legs, and they've used Age of Sigmar Stormcast Eternal shoulders. Cool. I like the conversion. They've done a reasonable job with the tools available. And yet the image we have of the Atramentar is just, hey, here is a stock Tartarus Terminator, but he's got a pair of trophy racks, and he's blue, so Night Lord right there. It just reeks of the low effort being put into it. We also have instances of things like repeating artwork. So all of the artwork in this book, except for the stuff that uses new models, and that is surprisingly rare considering the time that this book has been released in, where we have new Mark III, yes, that pops up in the book. Of course, it's hard to tell with things like the Dreadnoughts, the Derrideos and such, but Demon Fulgrim's the other one that really sticks out. So they managed to get these couple of units into there, but on the whole, we see repeating artwork throughout this book, many of which you've seen in previous books, both in the Age of Darkness rulebook, the Legiones Astartes books, and of course the Heresy 1.0 era of books. And so that's kind of underwhelming. But then to see the same artwork repeated 2 pages apart and on pages with relatively little text, so it makes the artwork all the more jarringly obvious as being repeated. It's not the first time we've seen this in the Horus Heresy series, but in this book I don't think I've ever seen it this close together like it is here. And this isn't just a case of 1.0 being better, and I get it, there is a lot of things that I think 1.0 gets right, and got right a lot better than 2.0. 2.0 is not in a great place yet, and I have to say this quite a bit to people because Heresy 1 had the better part of 10, 11 years to establish itself. We had from 2012 all the way through to 2022. 10 years right there for Heresy 1 to get its books out, to create that solid foundation for a system. And Heresy 2 is starting out in a funny place because it hasn't had that length of development time. It's had a year odd. Now, the time being used wisely is a different story because I think at this point it's pretty safe to say the time has been wasted that was allocated towards this release. And that may upset some people, but, well, frankly, I don't care. That's the situation as I see it. And Heresy 1.0, in my mind, is the better game with the better attention to detail created with more passion, but without the support of the company behind it, especially in the form of plastic kits and such. Heresy 2 is the upcoming game, which has the support in that it gets a reasonable number of plastic kits released, maybe not the ones we want or need, but it's getting there, and in the next 5 years it might turn into a brilliant game. It's not there yet, it's just more flawed currently than 1.0 was at the end of its run, and that should be expected. But this book doesn't add anything that fixes this problem. And that's frustrating to see because I get it. Maybe the authors, the writers of this system, they don't want to be constantly churning out FAQs. They don't want to constantly be having to revisit the work they've already done and do it all over again. But I feel as the customer that there is some sort of responsibility there to create a level of work, create a level of content which is, for all intents and purposes, balanced, that is keeping people happy, that solves the majority of issues with the game as it currently stands, and is trying to fix the things that people perceive as flawed. And this game definitely is not in that position currently. We are not seeing changes to existing overpowered units, we're not seeing changes to buff underpowered units. Again, case in point, the Atramentar, or the Salamanders. We could have had the Salamanders and the Emperor's Children both taking pride of place in this book. The Salamanders were amped up quite a bit in the lead up to this book, and yet what we actually saw with them was, well, basically nothing being done with the Salamanders beyond, hey, here's a new unit, here's a mission. Which is very Siege of Cathonia style, these missions. And that doesn't work for me. You could have had a post-Vulcan Salamanders force, like, okay, here's a new Rite of War, here's a change to your Legion trait, because your Legion trait is, frankly, awful, and demonstrably so. Let's fix it. The book does none of that. And so, well, to sum up this review, the book doesn't add enough unique content to justify its existence. It doesn't even do enough with what it has to, in my mind, justify printing, even for the sake of completionism, this imagery onto paper. I mean, yep, cool, there's a couple of little pictures of converted units in here, there's some artworks of the different legions, but there's only half a dozen pictures in here, in this whole book, of the different legions and how they look. And it's in the very much more 2.0 style. It doesn't have the grit that 1.0 really had. It's like if you described the artwork in a Heresy 1 black book from Forge World to someone, and they did an artist recreation of that, like the police sketch artist. And that's what it feels like. So on the whole, is the book worth it? No. Is it a good book? No. Is it a well-written book? No. Is the book affordable? No. Is there any justifiable reason for purchasing this book? Well, it's a trap. it's a trap for the Emperor's Children players, because if you want the rules for playing Traitor Emperor's Children, the Proto-Noise Marines, this is the book. Unfortunately, though, you are roped into essentially having to buy an expensive Fulgrim who's exceedingly overpriced. I don't care how big it is. Most of his size is wings. There is no justification for what they're charging for that miniature. And in order to use many of these rights of war in here, you have to use that miniature or some facsimile of that miniature. If you're playing in your local friends group, I'm sure no one would complain. But good luck playing this down at Forge World and bringing a 3D printed Fulgrim in. I think people would frown upon that. No, this is a problem. And on top of that, the rules are... they're in the running with the 1,000 Suns for the worst rules in Heresy 2.0 as a Legion trait. Maybe just behind Salamanders. They are all really that awful. I won't even get into how they function, but they're bad. And on top of that, these rules are supposed to sort of hint towards using all these augments and upgrades from, like, Fabius Bile's surgeries on the Emperor's Children. You can just run the 3rd Company Elite Rite of War out of the regular Heresy rulebook, and you can achieve a better result. So it doesn't really justify the existence of those rules, which I think are really what this selling point of this book is. It's why Fulgrim is on the front cover. Buy this Emperor's Children book because Emperor's Children rules. And on top of that, one last little critique here. The book's just badly written. I sort of mentioned earlier it was badly written, but go read the rules for Demon Primarch, and then go and read all of the rules for the Stupefy and things like that for the Emperor's Children. It's just a mess, an unfortunate mess. And I think that's going to be a turn-off for a lot of people, because they're going to say, well, this is a professional company making a professional quality product. Was this the best you could do? And apparently, yeah, this is the best they could do. And it does not bode well for the system, because, like I say, this is the Exemplary Battles, the Age of Darkness, Volume 1. So they plan on releasing more of these books. And frankly, this is so underwhelming. I think they really need to step up their game on the next book, because if they don't, hey, if they've printed very few copies, they might still sell out. But it's not exactly going to fly off the shelves, if you know what I mean. Because, well, people are just going to get PDF copies, take photos of what they need, etc., if there is no justifiable reason to actually purchase the book and have it in their collection. And I mean, you've seen how small it is next to the other books. Even Siege of Cathonia was quite a small and underwhelming book. I mean, it looks like Citizen Kane next to this. Anyway, that's it for me. Apparently, never satisfied Heresy 1 player who has no valuable opinions and is just annoyed that this is not Heresy 1.0. Because, hey, that's seems to be the running line of hater critique I notice going around is, hey, you can't just dislike this for honest reasons. You have no integrity. No, you must only dislike this because you're a hater. It can't be because it's bad. Well, here we are. Book's bad. See you all next time.